Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we share an incredible true story of hope and kindness from New York City. A 9-year-old paralyzed girl, Sophie Johnson, had lost all hope after a tragic accident. But when a humble 27-year-old mechanic, Daniel Carter, stepped into her life, everything changed. Watch as compassion, determination and skill come together to perform a miracle that brings joy not only to Sophie, but also to her billionaire mother, Olivia Johnson. Like, share and subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. In the heart of New York City, the rain poured relentlessly, turning the streets into reflective mirrors of neon and headlights. 9-year-old Sophie Johnson, female, sat quietly in her wheelchair, her small hands clutching the armrests as she stared at the puddles forming on the sidewalk. The accident that had changed her life was still fresh in memory, not just for her but for her mother, Olivia Johnson, 40, female, a powerful billionaire businesswoman who had spent years trying to find a cure for her daughter's paralysis. No hospital, no specialist, no cutting-edge therapy had succeeded. Olivia's expensive cars, luxurious apartments and private jets felt meaningless when faced with Sophie's silent tears. Despite having every material possession one could dream of, she couldn't purchase what mattered most: her daughter's mobility and happiness. Doctors had delivered the same cruel verdict time and again: she will never walk again. Each repetition of those words tightened the knot of helplessness in Olivia's chest. She watched Sophie's once bright eyes dim, her laughter fading like an echo, leaving behind quiet resignation and sorrow that weighed heavily on both their hearts. The storm that afternoon was more than weather. It mirrored the gloom that had settled over their lives. Their luxury car, a sleek black sedan, sputtered to a stop in front of a small, inconspicuous garage nestled between two old brownstones. Olivia sighed, frustration and worry etched across her face. She had no choice but to wait, shivering in the rain, as Sophie's wheelchair wheeled slowly beside her. The sound of raindrops pelting metal and asphalt amplified the helplessness that had become routine in their lives. Sophie glanced up at her mother with a small, hopeful smile, sensing the tension, yet trying to offer comfort in her own innocent way. From inside the garage, a young man emerged, shaking water from his dark hair and wiping grease from his hands. Daniel Carter, 27, male, approached with a calm, kind demeanor. His eyes softened as he took in the sight of the mother and daughter standing in the rain. Despite being a mechanic working in a modest, somewhat run-down garage, Daniel carried an air of quiet confidence and empathy that immediately stood out. He knelt beside Sophie's wheelchair, examining the rusted wheels and worn-out frame with the care of someone handling a fragile treasure. "Mind if I take a look at this?" he asked gently, his voice calm but reassuring. Olivia hesitated, crossing her arms, her mind skeptical. How could a mechanic, however kind, succeed where specialists had failed for years? But something about Daniel's composed manner, his steady hands, and the sincerity shining in his eyes prompted her to nod. Sophie, on the other hand, leaned forward slightly, curiosity lighting up her face. For the first time in months, her eyes held more than resignation, they held possibility. The small spark of hope was fragile but undeniable, igniting a tiny warmth in Olivia's heart that she hadn't felt in a long time. Daniel moved with a combination of practicality and care, inspecting the wheelchair thoroughly. He checked each wheel, tested the balance, and examined the joints, speaking softly to Sophie as he worked. "This isn't just a chair, you know," he said, smiling faintly. "We can make it strong, steady, maybe even help you move better than before." Sophie's eyes widened. Could it really be possible? Could someone repair not only the chair, but perhaps even give her a chance at more independence? Olivia watched cautiously, her heart torn between hope and fear of disappointment. As Daniel worked, he explained his plan in simple terms, pointing out which parts would need reinforcing, which wheels could be replaced, and how he could fabricate custom components from spare materials in his garage. Olivia listened quietly, realizing that he approached the task with more than just technical skill. He brought patience, creativity, and compassion to the work. Each suggestion he made felt thoughtful, precise, and deeply human. Sophie, sensing the careful attention, reached out to touch one of the tools, her small fingers brushing against the cold metal. A giggle escaped her lips, a sound Olivia hadn't heard in months, and it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. The storm began to ease outside, but inside the garage, a different kind of energy emerged. Daniel's presence, his meticulous movements, and his quiet encouragement began to transform the space. The tools, spare parts, and scattered pieces of metal took on new meaning. They were the building blocks of possibility, of hope, of a second chance for Sophie. Olivia felt a swelling in her chest, realizing that while she couldn't give her daughter mobility, perhaps someone else could help her regain a part of her lost childhood, one careful movement at a time. Finally, Daniel straightened and looked at both mother and daughter, wiping his hands on a rag. "I'll need some time to make it right," he said. "It's going to take days, maybe weeks, but I promise I'll do everything I can." Sophie's face lit up, and even Olivia felt a cautious thrill of optimism. For the first time in a long time, the weight of despair seemed to lift slightly. What began as a simple roadside breakdown had evolved into the first step towards something extraordinary, a possibility that kindness, skill, and determination could create real change, even in the face of years of hopelessness. From that day onward, the lives of all three were intertwined by more than circumstance. Sophie began to visit Daniel's garage, watching him work, fascinated by the way he transformed broken pieces into a functional wheelchair. Olivia observed from a distance, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and wonder filling her chest. Each visit restored a fragment of Sophie's laughter. Each adjustment Daniel made offered a small victory over years of sorrow. And in that small garage, amidst the smell of grease and metal, hope quietly returned. By the end of the first week, Sophie was already testing small movements with the chair under Daniel's guidance. Olivia's eyes glistened as she witnessed her daughter's tentative attempts, each motion more confident than the last. The young mechanic never treated Sophie with pity. He treated her with respect, encouragement, and quiet optimism. For Olivia, it was a revelation. Miracles sometimes came from the most unexpected people. And for Sophie, the spark of belief had been reignited, lighting the first flame of freedom she had experienced in years. Daniel Carter, 27, male, spent long hours in his small garage, the faint hum of machines and the scent of grease blending with the soft patter of rain outside. Sophie Johnson, 9, female, had begun visiting regularly, her small hands gripping the edges of the wheelchair as she watched him work with rapt attention. Every bolt tightened, every wheel adjusted, every piece of scrap metal molded into place was a step toward hope. Daniel's patience and meticulous care revealed more than technical skill. It revealed a heart committed to making a difference, showing that miracles sometimes began in the humblest of places. Each day, Daniel devised new methods to strengthen the wheelchair, consulting spare motors and car parts as if they were puzzle pieces destined for a greater purpose. Sophie's laughter, tentative at first, began to echo through the garage like a delicate symphony. Her curiosity replaced the sorrow that had settled in her eyes. Olivia Johnson, 40, female, standing quietly nearby, could hardly believe what she was witnessing. The mechanic, whom she had first met as a stranger, was transforming despair into possibility, showing that determination and kindness could overcome the limitations of wealth and medicine alike. The first few attempts to adjust Sophie's balance were met with wobbling and uncertainty. Daniel guided her gently, demonstrating how to shift weight and move the wheelchair with subtle precision. Sophie's eyes widened with surprise each time she found herself balancing more steadily, and a smile crept onto her lips. Olivia, usually guarded and stoic, felt tears prickle her eyes. For months she had watched her daughter's spirit dwindle, and now, under the guidance of a humble mechanic, she saw sparks of life returning. It was as if hope itself had been crafted piece by piece, like the wheelchair before them. Daniel worked late into the nights, often staying past sunset, with only a single lamp illuminating his workspace. Sparks flew from metal, and the faint whirring of small motors filled the air. Sophie occasionally leaned forward to peer over the edge of the workbench, fascinated by the way Daniel's hands moved with skill and care. Olivia, seated quietly in the corner, marveled at his focus and dedication. The bond between the young mechanic and Sophie grew stronger with each day. His encouragement was steady, never condescending, never rushed. He treated her as if she were capable of far more than anyone had believed possible. With each visit, Sophie grew more confident. She learned to maneuver the partially rebuilt wheelchair, discovering that her body could respond in ways she hadn't thought possible. Laughter began to fill the garage, mingling with the scent of oil and metal. Olivia watched in awe, feeling a mixture of relief, gratitude, and astonishment. The connection between Daniel and Sophie was undeniable, not just as mechanic and client, but as mentor and student, and perhaps even as friends who shared an unspoken understanding of perseverance and hope. Daniel's ingenuity extended beyond mechanics. He considered Sophie's comfort, the alignment of her legs, the support for her back, and the ease of movement. He experimented with different angles, different materials, and adjusted every component until it was perfect. Sophie's excitement grew each day, and even Olivia's protective instincts gave way to admiration. The once paralyzed girl, whose laughter had been muted by years of disappointment, now found herself daring to imagine new possibilities. With each minor improvement, the garage transformed into a space of potential, filled with the sound of progress and the warmth of human connection. As weeks passed, Daniel fine-tuned the wheelchair to not only stabilize Sophie, but to provide subtle support that could assist her in standing. Sophie's initial apprehension gave way to cautious excitement as she practiced small movements under Daniel's guidance. Olivia watched silently, her heart swelling with pride and relief. The bond between the mechanic and the girl deepened, built upon patience, trust, and unwavering encouragement. Each day marked a small victory, and with each victory, Sophie reclaimed a piece of her childhood that had been lost in the shadows of her paralysis. By the time Daniel declared the wheelchair ready, it was no longer just a chair. It was a carefully crafted symbol of possibility. Every component reflected his effort, ingenuity, and compassion. Sophie had learned to maneuver it with ease, stand for brief moments with Daniel's assistance, and even push herself forward with small bursts of confidence. Olivia, tears streaming down her face, finally understood that miracles could come from unexpected places. What had started as a roadside encounter on a rainy day had blossomed into a transformative journey, showing that human kindness and dedication could achieve what doctors, money, and fear had deemed impossible. The final day before Sophie's first full test of the wheelchair was electric with anticipation. Daniel adjusted every bolt, tested each mechanism, and ensured that the chair could provide both mobility and balance. Sophie practiced under his watchful eye, her confidence growing with each movement. Olivia stood nearby, silently observing, her heart pounding with hope and anxiety. The once quiet garage now buzzed with energy, the atmosphere heavy with expectation. Daniel, the young mechanic who had begun as a stranger, had become the architect of Sophie's newfound independence, proving that compassion, skill, and relentless determination could change lives in ways no one anticipated. The morning sun filtered softly through the small garage's windows, casting warm light across the tools, workbenches, and the polished frame of Sophie's upgraded wheelchair. Daniel Carter, 27 male, adjusted the final components carefully, double-checking bolts, wheels, and motor alignment. His hands, steady and confident, reflected years of experience and tireless dedication. Sophie Johnson, 9 female, sat nervously in the chair, gripping the armrests with small, trembling hands. Her wide eyes alternated between curiosity, fear, and hope. Olivia Johnson, 40 female, stood a few feet away, her heart pounding as she watched the culmination of weeks of effort, sweat, and unwavering determination. Daniel crouched beside Sophie, his voice calm and reassuring. "Take it slow, one push at a time," he instructed, encouraging her with gentle smiles. Sophie inhaled sharply, her tiny frame tense with anticipation. She began moving the wheelchair forward, first a few inches, then feet, feeling the smooth response of the custom mechanisms. The chair glided with remarkable ease, every turn and adjustment a testament to Daniel's skill and care. Sophie's lips curved into a tentative smile, a spark of joy shining in her eyes for the first time in years. Olivia's chest tightened as she realized this was more than mechanical precision. It was hope materialized. Encouraged, Sophie pressed herself forward with slightly more confidence. Daniel's eyes never left hers, ready to guide and support at any moment. The chair's stability and responsiveness amazed her. It seemed as if the machine understood her movements, her body, her intentions. The weeks of visits, laughter, and small exercises had built her confidence, but this was the ultimate test. Olivia's hand hovered near Sophie's shoulder, trembling as she resisted the urge to intervene. For months, she had watched her daughter's spirit shrink under the weight of immobility and despair, and now the light of possibility flooded the room. With a deep breath, Sophie attempted something she hadn't dared to try in years, leaning forward and adjusting her posture. The chair supported her movements perfectly, and for the first time, she allowed herself to rise slightly. Her small hands gripped the armrests tightly as her legs wobbled, but she remained upright with Daniel's guidance. "You're doing amazing," he whispered encouragingly. Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes, streaming down her cheeks as she stepped closer, her hands clasped together. The moment was raw, emotional and powerful, a perfect blend of triumph, relief and love, reflecting the journey that had brought them here. Sophie's balance improved with each step. Her confidence surged as she realized she could maintain her upright stance longer. Daniel adjusted the wheelchair's support subtly, his experienced hands ensuring stability without hindering movement. The joy on Sophie's face was unmistakable. Laughter bubbled from her lips, light and melodic. Olivia, overwhelmed with emotion, watched silently, unable to find words. She had spent years seeking medical miracles, spending fortunes, and yet it was a young, humble mechanic who had unlocked the most important gift: hope. The room, filled with the hum of the chair and Sophie's laughter, felt like a cathedral of human perseverance. Word of the achievement began to spread immediately. Neighbors who had occasionally glanced at the garage peeked in, amazed at the scene before them. Sophie, still standing with Daniel's support, waved shyly, her confidence growing. Olivia's hands trembled as she gently wiped her tears, marveling at the transformation not only in the wheelchair but in her daughter. This was more than a physical accomplishment. It was emotional, psychological, and spiritual. Daniel's tireless commitment had restored something far more valuable than mobility, a sense of purpose, courage, and joy that money or medicine had failed to provide. As the day progressed, Sophie experimented with moving independently, leaning and pushing herself slightly without Daniel's hands guiding her. Each successful attempt brought cheers and laughter. The bond between the mechanic and the young girl had deepened immensely. It was built on trust, patience, and shared hope. Olivia finally approached, her arms wrapping around Sophie in a tight embrace. "You've given her life back," she whispered to Daniel, her voice choked with gratitude. Daniel smiled humbly, brushing off the praise. For him, the reward was the sparkle in Sophie's eyes and the restored warmth in her mother's heart. The garage, once filled with shadows of uncertainty and despair, now resonated with light, laughter, and renewed optimism. Daniel carefully demonstrated small adjustments to the wheelchair, showing Sophie how to navigate turns and maintain balance. She absorbed every instruction, her determination evident in her posture and expressions. Olivia watched, sometimes blinking back tears, marveling at how a young mechanic's compassion could achieve what specialists had failed to deliver over years. This day marked a turning point, not only in Sophie's life, but in the perception of what dedication, patience and love could accomplish. By evening, Sophie had grown confident enough to move across the garage with minimal support. Daniel stepped back, observing her independence with pride. Olivia knelt beside her daughter, her hands brushing over the chair as though it were a precious artifact, though it was Daniel's ingenuity that had truly made it miraculous. The hum of the city outside faded into insignificance compared to the quiet triumph within the garage. The young mechanic had done more than repair a wheelchair. He had restored hope, freedom, and joy, proving that perseverance and human kindness could overcome obstacles that wealth and medicine could not. The following day, Sophie's story began to spread across New York City. News outlets picked up the tale of the poor, kind mechanic who had given a billionaire's daughter a second chance at life. The community, inspired by Daniel's dedication and Sophie's courage, rallied around them. Each retelling emphasized the humility, compassion, and extraordinary skill of one young man who refused to see limits. For Olivia, it was a lesson in patience and belief. And for Sophie, it was the beginning of a life no longer defined by confinement, but by newfound independence and unshakable confidence. As the sun set, Daniel stood outside the garage, exhausted but content. Sophie waved from her wheelchair, now more than a chair, a symbol of triumph. Olivia embraced her daughter again, tears streaming freely, overwhelmed by the miracle they had witnessed. This story, while deeply personal, became a universal reminder that determination, love, and skill could change lives in unimaginable ways. Daniel's actions proved that even ordinary individuals, when driven by compassion, could create extraordinary transformations, leaving lasting impressions on all who heard their story.